Welcome in, y'all. It's another edition of Biscuits and SEC Live. This is our 26th show. Appreciate y'all tuning in and being here with us throughout the off season as we continue to talk all things SEC, college sports in the off season. So got a good show for you today. We'll talk, of course, Florida's title, the other semifinal games in the Final Four, touch on the women's side as well as the Lady Gamecocks played for a title. And then we'll get in a little bit to the A&M basketball hire, Bucky McMillan out of Samford, and start diving into baseball. So, and I think a little spring game stuff as well. So jam-packed show. Thanks for joining. Brought to you by the Steer Agency. We'll shout them out later in the episode as well. But in the meantime, let's just go ahead and kick it off. So Bossman, how you doing?
Doing good. Got a beautiful day here in Austin, and can't wait to get into it. Congratulations to the Gators on a fantastic run all the way through. I won't toot my own horn too much, but I did pick the Florida Gators to win. The rest of my bracket was absolute trash. So I didn't end up winning any pools this year. However, I did pick the Florida Gators. So
that's right. You didn't end up winning because I won my bracket. Not that it was that good, but I had Florida winning, and that put me over the top. I think I finished like 75th or 80th percentile. So pretty average, but yeah, I was able to win two pools thanks to Florida pulling it out. And so got a little money in my pocket and feeling good. I'm a college hoops expert. So if you guys need any tips next March Madness, DM us, Biscuits and SEC, and I'll let you know what's going down. So real quick, as you can see below, biscuitsandsec.com/newsletter. We send that out on Wednesdays during the off season, and then on Mondays and Fridays during the season. So would appreciate if you would consider subscribing there. It is free, and we just deliver SEC and college sports news to your inbox. And obviously we do the show here. So please like, subscribe, follow us on socials, etc. And let's get right into it. So I feel like we should probably just start with the Florida title, and then we can break down some of the semifinal stuff too, but don't want to bury the lead here. Obviously, Florida did win the national title, took down Auburn in the semis, and then ultimately Houston in the final. Both of those games, as was kind of the theme of the tournament for Florida, required some second half comebacks. So what are your thoughts on, I guess I'll say another basketball title for Florida? I mean, pretty crazy when you look at what they've done the last 20 years.
It really is, but that's been few and far between, right? Like, hey, look, I remember, you remember those titles, but I was kind of forgetting exactly when they happened. I knew they happened during that kind of Urban Meyer, Billy Donovan era in Florida athletics, where everything was just going so well in Gainesville. And you had, for some reason, I was thinking it was like 08 or 09, but it was actually 06, 07. So put that in perspective. It's been a long time, right? Like it's been 15 years, basically a little over 15 years since their last title in basketball. And Florida has had good teams, but they haven't been able to get back up to that level since Billy Donovan left. And congrats to Todd Golden, man. Todd Golden comes in and rebuilds that team and did an incredible job, right? And excuse me, he built a winner. So it was really fun to watch them throughout the tournament. I won't lie and say that I watched a ton of SEC basketball this year. While I do love the SEC, mostly we are football focused here, and baseball a lot as well. But through the year, I watched some SEC basketball, and the games I did watch, I watched a decent amount of Florida, and just really because I knew that they were a good team and had a lot of potential in the tournament, and I just enjoyed watching them. And they really turned it on too during the tournament. However, they had some close battles, and they didn't have an easy run to the Final Four. I mean, they had to get past the defending national champs in UConn, beat them by just a couple. And, right in the newsletter this morning, I went through it, and because my memory started being kicked. They overcame 8 or more point deficits in the second half of the last 3 games they played. So Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four, Elite 8, Final Four, and national championship game. They came back from at least 8 down in all of those games. And I looked in like the ESPN, what percent did they have to win? Almost every single one of those games, at least probably like midway through the second half, or at least early in the second half, the opposing team had a 90+% chance to win those games, all of those games. So very impressive run. They were never down and out. They were always fighting, always scrapping, always clawing. You couldn't count them out at any point. And you knew that you had Walter Clayton Jr. over there, right, who's just been clutch all the way through, scores 30 points against Auburn, 30+ against Auburn, and comes up with the defining defensive play. Although there were 2 down the stretch in that championship game, but the defining defensive play that stops the final potential shot for Houston. So really fantastic run for the Gators all the way through. And like you said, add another banner to the rafters in Gainesville.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, you brought up some good points there, right? So first of all, Todd Golden, it's only his 3rd year at Florida, so he's probably building something extremely impressive. And I know a lot has been made, especially on the football side of things, with how Florida is doing, and specifically Scott Strickland, the athletic director, and how he brought in Mullen. That didn't work. He brought in Napier, and that was shaky, but still shaky. But you have to give credit here, right? I mean, he hires Todd Golden from San Francisco, and the guy comes in and basically is an immediate winner and gets you a title in year 3. So really impressive stuff from Florida. Walter Clayton, just obviously the player of the tournament. In all of those, in all of those games where they were down, he came alive. So if you look at his stat log per game, in the UConn game where they were down, he has 23 points, several of those coming late on ridiculous 3-pointers. Maryland, they were in control the whole game. He has 13 points, not really needed. Okay, no problem. Texas Tech, they're down, need a crazy second half comeback. He has 30 points. Auburn, not really like a crazy late comeback, but they were down. What were they down? I think in just looking at it, they were down 46-38 at one point in the second half. So not a crazy deficit, but a big deficit, especially against a team like Auburn. And Clayton ends up with 34 in that game, again, with several daggers late. His championship game was a lot quieter, but that was really just a defensive struggle. I would give Houston a lot of credit there. Not that Clayton played a bad game whatsoever, but, Houston is just suffocating on defense, and, Florida as a team did what they needed to do. So, yeah, really impressive. I mean, I think if you just look back at Florida as a team, if you're another fan of another team and you're kind of looking, okay, how do you do this now? I mean, Florida had height, length, and the best point guard in the tournament, right? That's a pretty good recipe to get the job done, where their defense was great. They have active hands. They're stealing the ball. They have athletic guys on the wing, multiple 6'10", 7-footers. They got a guy who's 7'9" who doesn't play because he's redshirting or something. And then they have the best guard in the tournament. So I heard somebody say that Clayton's tournament reminded them of Kemba Walker and Shabazz Napier, the 2, UConn stars that won titles basically single-handedly. I don't know if it was quite that good, because I think Florida has a lot of good players in depth, but on that level, just in terms of a start to finish tournament that will not be forgotten soon.
No, without a doubt. Yeah, he was a star. Emmanuel Sharp, I think we ought to touch on that before we move on from the national championship game, because we can talk about the other games, on the other side of the bracket, right? Houston and Duke, we can touch on that as well. But, two final points, I guess, on this. One is Emmanuel Sharp. I feel bad for the kid down the stretch. He makes two boneheaded plays that did it cost Houston the game in crunch time? Yeah, right. Overall, though, like it's always a team effort. There's always you could go back in the first half and parts of the second half, right? Missed free throws. There's a lot of things that could point. Okay, this ended up losing Houston the game, but you also can't overlook the two plays in the final 26 seconds. One where he tries to drive to the basket and gets the ball stolen because he dribbles it into traffic. Didn't need to do that. And then the final play where he had a chance to get up a three, and he, instead of pump faking, he jumps. He leaves his feet, and then he drops the ball, and you can't do that. That's a travel if you pick it back up. And so he realizes it and just has to kind of guard the ball. And Florida gets to it first, and the clock runs out. So unfortunate for him. I don't think you can watch this game, though, or recap this game without those two plays as well, because not even getting a shot off when you have a chance for a game-winning three at the buzzer is pretty inexcusable, frankly. So feel bad for the kid. That's rough. And then the last thing I want to say, too, this isn't necessarily to the game, but you brought up Scott Strickland. Man, he ought to be hugging and thanking Todd Golden for saving his you-know-what, because he's had, like you said, Dan Mullen had Billy Napier. Billy Napier saves his tail last year. And, I think if Billy Napier goes, Scott Strickland goes last year. And so Billy Napier saves him once. Now you've got Todd Golden, wins the national championship, kind of saves him again, because you're looking across. And if there wasn't Todd Golden and Todd Golden doing what he has done now with the Florida basketball team, kind of be a little bit of a bleak outlook. I mean, look, the Florida baseball team has been very good for a very long time. However, this year, if you're looking at it, don't look up now, guys. If you haven't looked at what's going on in SEC baseball yet, I understand. But, now's the time to start checking it out. And we'll touch on it a little later in the show. But briefly, Florida is 1-11 right now in SEC play.
Yeah. And they were top 5, I think, preseason.
Top 5 preseason. So there's been 2 teams, right, who were top 5 preseason who have completely fallen out. One, it's our Aggies, and 2 is the Florida Gators, who were expected to be very good. And last year, I think I'm remembering correctly, Florida was in the College World Series along with Texas A&M. He had Jack, I can never say his name right, Caglianone, I think. Caglianone.
Something like that.
Absolute stud, can just absolutely rake the ball, and was a blast to watch. But then this year, they have just fallen off a cliff. So Scott Strickland, you better give Todd Golden another big old hug tonight, because that guy saved your job.
Yeah.
And congrats on the hire, because you made the hire.
Right. No, I think that's fair. And to take it back to your first point on Sharp, I agree. I think I will give credit on the dribble drive that he had more so to Florida than him. I think you see that play all the time where you're driving down whatever the alley, right? Like outside the lane, but coming downhill, and the guy who's sloughing off of his man in the corner comes over to help, but it's not really like help. It's just a swipe, right? Yep. And you see all the time it's a foul because they whiff, or they completely whiff, and the guy just maneuvers around them and gets to the rim. And I think it was Will Ricard for Florida, if I'm not mistaken, but he just made a great play, right? He steps in, sloughing off his man on the wing, and gets all ball. And then at that point, it's kind of luck of the draw, and it just happens to kick off Sharp's knee. And then, at the end of the game, not good. It seems like he kind of just had a brain fart, froze. But what makes it so hard is, and we can just check out this transition, but in the Duke game, right? I mean, Houston made every single play down the stretch. Yeah. They didn't miss a beat, I guess, except for that technical foul that guy, which was insane. But and Sharp was a big part of that. I mean, Sharp, I'm just looking at the play-by-play now. Sharp made multiple free throws and multiple threes down the stretch in that Duke game to really help them win. So speaking of that game, is that the biggest choke job in Final Four history? I mean, again, neither one of us are college basketball historians. Maybe this is prisoner of the moment, but you're Duke and you are up 9 points with like 2 minutes left. And all of a sudden, Houston starts pressing, obviously, and Duke looks like they've never seen a press in their life.
I mean, I'm not going to say it's the biggest choke job in Final Four history. I'm sure, folks, leave us a comment if you can remember one. I was much more of a college basketball historian when Drew Gooden was on the cover of NCAA, EA Sports NCAA, like 2005. That was back when I was all into college basketball. But since then, I've ventured much more towards football. But I'm sure there has been a bigger collapse in Final Four history, but it was pretty dang bad. I mean, right in the newsletter this morning, again, biscuitsandSEC.com/newsletter. Go sign up for that. Comes to you every Wednesday in the off season and Monday and Friday during the season, during football season. But 15-3 run at the end of the game for Houston. And like you said, Duke they look like they hadn't seen a press. And I think part of that is, hey, Houston is very fast, very long, right? Very tall. And Duke is the same, but Duke is they were a young team. These one and done type of schools have been getting these kids in and they're pretty young. Duke is a very young team. So Duke with that youth, I know they've played AAU ball. They've been playing ball for a long, long time, but still it's a little bit different when you're going up against a Houston who's a number 1 seed coached by Kelvin Sampson, who know what they're doing, but still, you're Duke, like that's on John Shire. You got to be able to break that at the end of the game and close it out. The other part of it too is they had a shot at the end. Cooper Flagg had the shot, and if he had hit that shot, we would have never been able to see, we would have seen so many edits from the Duke side for all of time, with Leitner and him back to back, because it was the same shot from the key. From the top of the key, it was on the elbow, and same turnaround. So had he hit that, it would have been gone down in Duke legend like the Leitner shot, but didn't hit it. So at the end of the day, Houston takes it out. But it was a pretty fascinating one. That was another one. I looked at the percent to win, and all these Final Four games pretty much, including the final, the chance to win, the graph was all like one team, 90% chance to win, 90% chance. Okay. 80, 70, 60, 50 within the last like 2 minutes. And then boom. Then, the other team just takes it and ends up winning the game. So I'll say this about the tournament as a whole, while it was in some ways a little boring because there wasn't that many upsets, by the time that we got to the Sweet 16, really the Elite 8, when we had all these really elite teams playing each other, they were all out wars and a lot of fun. And so, so many of them went down to the final 2 minutes that we saw a lot of good basketball, and it was a lot of fun to watch them.
Yeah, it really was. And it's super fun, obviously, as a SEC-based show, newsletter, everything that we do, to have so many SEC teams in the mix from making the tournament to the Sweet 16 to the Elite 8 to the Final Four, and then ultimately winning. It was a really fun ride, including, I don't think we need to spend a ton of time here because we've already, talked most of the Final Four, but Auburn, Florida playing each other in the Final Four. I mean, that's awesome, right? For the conference, for the league. I know, I'm sure you saw, but of course Sankey was there all weekend, supporting the teams, and that's only going to, in my opinion, at least, only going to push these other SEC teams to, continue pursuing basketball, trying to innovate, make the right hire, whatever the case, NIL funds. But, I know I've heard some sentiment online or in various, podcasts where it's like, hold on, the SEC can't also be the best in basketball now too, right? They SEC owns football, SEC owns baseball. and we'll see. I mean, again, this is all new, so maybe it's a flash in the pan, but to me, unless these coaches go somewhere else, I mean, it's here to stay. You look across the league, and there's good coaches, and that's why these teams are performing well. So I think they're the SEC's here to stay.
I think it is too, and I think you're seeing that with the resources that schools are putting into this, right? I mean, I don't think that we're going to see much of a drop off in the SEC. In fact, I mean, you're seeing, Texas, let's go of Rodney Terry, right? They go and get Sean Miller. You're seeing in the portal a lot of movement in the portal. Ole Miss, right? Ole Miss sees Texas A&M come after Chris Beard, up his contract, give that guy an extension. We want Ole Miss basketball to be in the mix every year, and we think this is the guy to do it. They're putting resources behind it, right? So I think you're seeing across the league, Arkansas goes and gets Calipari last year, right? Coach Cal likely to be in Fayetteville for a long time to come now, and Arkansas is only going to get better. We'll see what Texas A&M does, right? Can LSU kind of find their footing again after being dormant for a long time, having the blip with Will Wade, and Wade getting eventually let go for being on FBI wiretaps. But I'm with you. I don't think that the SEC is going anywhere. I mean, I got writing the newsletter this morning. I had a little bit of a segment on all of the transfer portal movement in and out of the SEC. There's a lot of incoming right now. But Kentucky is super active, Alabama active, Ole Miss very active in the portal, Oklahoma very active in the portal. In fact, they got a 4-star point guard from Miami. So I don't think the SEC is going anywhere. I think that the level of play, this is kind of like the floor, maybe it's the ceiling. I don't know if you get 14 out of 16 teams in the tournament every single year. However, I do think that the SEC is poised to get 10 plus teams into the tournament most years right now. Over the next 5 years, I would bet good money that the SEC gets 10 plus every year.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think it's kind of a random point, but I was just thinking as you were talking there, one more thing I think that's playing into this. Of course, the resources, the coaches, everything, but the Big Ten has just as much resources as the SEC. I think something that's at play here, and we've certainly seen this in football, but I think it rings true for basketball as well, and that is so many cities across the SEC footprint now, especially that the SEC footprint includes Texas, are exploding, right? You think back to like basketball and college basketball historically, it was the Big East and the Big Ten and, northern schools. And there's still, don't get me wrong, tons of phenomenal recruits coming out of those, New York, Jersey, Philly, DC, Detroit, Cleveland, all those cities. But I think the basketball in the South, even at the high school level, has just dramatically improved because there's more kids, there's more people, right? Like, Charlotte, Tampa, Jacksonville, Atlanta, Nashville, Houston, Austin, Dallas, like all these cities over the last 25 years have dramatically increased in population. And, ergo, there's more college level athletes coming out of the South now than there was back in the 80s and 90s when college hoops was really dominated by, those sort of Big Ten, Big East style programs. And so I think from a recruiting perspective, it's become a lot easier because you can go get 4 and 5 star kids that are in your state or a couple hours away, as opposed to, again, think back to like the 80s, like there's not a ton of high level basketball guys coming out of, Alabama and Georgia and Tennessee. Right. So anyway, that's just kind of an aside point, but I think that factors in here.
That's an interesting point. I hadn't thought about that. But yeah, it does kind of take demographics, just demographic change in our country into account, right? Just kind of something in the background that is changing. And yeah, you're right. Over the last 10 years, a lot of the SEC footprint, a lot of the states in the footprint have seen a lot of growth and a lot of folks coming from the coasts and, also from the north, which I understand, because why in the world would you want to live in the cold? Couldn't understand it for months on end. I don't know why you'd move to like Colorado or anything like that.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, air conditioning's done wonders for the South's population over the last 40 years. Once they figured that out, people started moving here. Go figure.
Yeah, that's right. I will be interested to see just a final point here on college basketball, and then we can move on to the news out of College Station. But yeah, I'm interested to see how, if the ACC bounces back, right? Because there was just a couple of teams in the ACC this year that were really worth a darn. Does UVA bounce back with the new head coach? What about NC State with Will Wade? Are they able to finally get it back and going? Does North Carolina bounce back after a down year? Now, I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't, but they just lost a 5-star point guard to the portal. So, hey, it's the portal era. You're going to lose kids. So I don't know how much I read into that. But the ACC is a classic basketball powerhouse, right? A blue blood conference. And they're very down. And it looks like that balance of power could be shifting from ACC to SEC and from Big East to SEC. And, we'll see. My 10-plus teams in the SEC get into the NCAA tournament over the next 5 years. I think that's true. But, if other conferences are going to make up the ground of getting the SEC down from 14 to 10 or from 14 to 8, from this year on, other conferences are going to have to step up. And the ACC is trying to do that with a couple of these hires. But I am interested to see over the next couple of years if the ACC bounces back. I generally think that they will, that a couple of these teams are going to figure it out and come back to prominence. But it was interesting to watch this year kind of how bad the ACC was, except for the top, when it was Duke and Clemson, and I'm thinking there was one more who was decent, but that was about it. Right? It was about 3 teams, and it was like, who else?
I think it was UNC was the only other tournament team, unless I'm mistaken. I
Right.
think it was Duke, Clemson, and then North Carolina. So
there was some talk about SMU at one point. They didn't end up making it, right? So
right,
and
traditional ACC power SMU. Right. So yeah, no, that's a good point. I think you're right. I think the ACC. I mean, North Carolina's North Carolina. Whether Hubert Davis needs to go for them to figure it out, or he'll figure it out on his own, who knows? But they'll be fine long term.
Yeah.
I don't know about Virginia. I don't know enough about the guy they hired. But I would think Will Wade. I think he'll get it done at NC State, and at the very least, get them back to perennially in the tournament, and then from there, it's anybody's guess.
I would think so. But the one thing I would say, and I think Will Wade's a very good coach, and LSU fans, I'm sorry, I know you guys loved him and wish he would come back, but he did a great job at LSU while he was there. Maybe got ran out of there when he shouldn't have. I don't know. That's up for debate, I guess. But McNeese State did a wonderful job there. And now he's at NC State. But NC State it's a tough place to win. He is certainly going to have his work cut out for him. There have been multiple coaches in the past who, even in the past 15 years, right, who have a pretty good pedigree, who go in there and are just kind of okay, So I'll be keeping an eye on that to see if Will Wade's able to get it done. I do think in 3 years, he's going to be in the Sweet 16 with NC State. Now, we can't forget that NC State made an absolutely ridiculous, unbelievable run to the Final Four 2 years ago. So it's not like they have just had no success for a very long time. They've had a little bit of success, but no one expected them to make that Final Four run, right? That was out of nowhere.
Yeah.
I think an 8 seed.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, all that to say, it's a tough place to win. I'm interested to see if Will Wade is able to get it done there.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, speaking of the Carolinas, before we hop into the news out of College Station, the Lady Gamecocks, South Carolina, I did briefly mention it off the top. I really don't think we need to spend much time on this because the games were kind of blowouts, but South Carolina in the semis beat SEC foe Texas 74-57, so that was not very close, and then turned around and got beat 82-59 to UConn. So Yeah, I don't know. A lot of entertaining games on the men's side. The women's not so much, but I guess I just ran into a buzzsaw with UConn, that Paige Buchers,
Mm-hmm.
and Gino Ariema's team, which what can you say, right? I mean, UConn is sort of the standard in women's college basketball. They've fallen off some in recent years, and teams like South Carolina or Notre Dame have sort of jumped up there. But UConn is still the standard, and Gino's a phenomenal coach. So ultimately, the Gamecocks' quest for back-to-back, I think,
Back to back, and would have been 3 out of 4.
Yeah, comes up a little short, but obviously what Don Staley's doing there is incredibly impressive, and I'm sure they'll be right back where they were, this year, again next year. So things to look forward to for the Lady Gamecocks. But yeah, we can hit on this real quick. So we talked last week about Buzz heading to Maryland and where A&M would go. I think we briefly mentioned Bucky McMillan as a potential hire. Honestly, don't know much about the guy. From what I read up on him since the hire, his background's a little interesting in that he was coaching at Mountain Brook High in Birmingham for a very long time. I think from what I read, it seems like he worked his way up from, middle school JV to ultimately the boys varsity coach there, won a couple state titles, coached there a long time, and then gets hired in 2020 to coach Samford, and does pretty well there. His overall record was 99-52. I think they made one tournament appearance and then another NIT appearance at a school like Samford that, forgive me, Samford fans, to my knowledge, has zero basketball history. So I would think for that program, it was a very good run during his tenure. But what are your thoughts on the hire? You can probably get into kind of his style and just, what do you think the fit is like for A&M?
Well, to check your history, Samford does not have a long history of success. They've been to the NCAA tournament 3 times total. So there you go. Getting to the tournament at Samford is a big deal.
Yeah.
I'm just excited for something new, as an A&M fan, right? If I'm putting that hat on for a second and putting my biased hat on, I'm just excited for a new era. I think that I really liked Buzz Williams. I liked what he was about. I liked the way he built the program. There was a lot that I liked about Buzz. At the end of the day, I think that A&M aspires to be a team that is perennially competing for Sweet 16s and higher. And Buzz in 6 years was never able to get there. And I think based on, a lot of what we touched on last week, but it was just kind of time. Buzz leaves after 5 or 6 years from almost every stop he goes to. Based on some stuff I saw this week, it seems like that's his MO. Based on kind of he ran a bunch of he loves basketball, right? He's a student of the game, and so he has seen that essentially expectations reset after 5 or 6 years, no matter how good or bad you have done in that time period. And so he thinks that 6 years is about the time to leave. So that's what he did. And I think that there was just the relationship had just run its course in College Station with Buzz and between the athletic department and the fan base. The fan base was just getting kind of restless and a little frustrated and ready for something new. So I found myself in that camp. I'm just excited for a new head coach. What I'm really excited about is what you touched on, which is the style of play. Again, I haven't watched a second of Samford basketball, but what I hear about Bucky McMillan, it seems very similar to Nate Oates, right? Nate Oates worked his way up. High school, then was an assistant at Buffalo, then becomes the head coach at Buffalo, and now he's at Alabama and doing incredible things with the Crimson Tide. So very similar for Bucky McMillan, like you talked about. He came up from middle school to high school, Samford. Now he's at Texas A&M, and the style of play is also very similar to Nate Oates and very different from Buzz Williams. Buzz Williams, much more of a half-court style of offense, which is anchored by a good defense, a more boring style of basketball, if you will, but it wins games. But Bucky is the opposite. Bucky, he talked about it in his opening press conference, talked about how, we're going to score the basketball, we're going to shoot, it's going to be up tempo. And I think Aggies are ready for that. I'm looking forward to it. The more he started talking about his style of offense, I was like, all right, I'm in. Maybe I'll watch more A&M basketball because of it, right? It's going to be fun. You're going to see a bunch of points scored. It might be a little bit chaotic at times, as those offenses and that style of play can get. But at the same time, you're going to score a lot of points. It's going to be bombs away, and you can expect to be in every game. So the last thing I'll say on it, and I'll let you give your thoughts, is he's got a total rebuild job. Total rebuild. And this isn't the old, okay, we got 6 guys on the roster, and if they transfer, they got to sit out a year. So I got a pretty good nucleus to this job that I'm coming into. It's the new era where a coach leaves, kids transfer, right? So we've already seen a couple kids transfer out of the A&M program, but it was also an older team at A&M as well. So there was a lot of kids that graduated. So this is complete roster overhaul, total roster turnover. So he's got a big job ahead of him. It's not going to be perfect in year one. Hey, John Calipari did pretty well at Arkansas in year one. But for me, I'm expecting a pretty good team next year. And then I'm expecting year 2, year 3, year 4 to be much better tournament, Sweet 16, that sort of thing in the years to come. But year 1, I have tempered expectations.
Yeah, I would agree. I think that's fair. As you said, I think A&M had 8 guys graduate, and then have had 3, I think, that I can think of off the top of my head that have hit the portal. So yeah, you're starting from scratch. It's certainly doable in the portal era. There's a million guys in the portal, so in theory, yes, you can find talented guys. Easier said than done. Everybody's looking to the portal. Not everybody needs 11 dudes. So big task. I would agree. I don't think I have a high expectations for next season, but yeah, the style of play excites me as a fan. As you said, Buzz, much more slow pace, half court defense, rebounding. I mean, he really emphasized rebounding. A&M, honestly, their best offense in a lot of games was offensive rebounds because they didn't have a great offense in general. So excited to see a little bit more wide open. I think Bucky presses. I think Sanford ran a press most of the year. So I was looking at some stats just to kind of showcase really how wide open this is. So Sanford's defense this past year forced 16 turnovers a game, which was 4th nationally. So they get after you, they pressure you, force mistakes. And then on the three-pointer side, they in 32 games this year, they took 978 threes. So that's doing some quick math. That's like 30 attempts a game. Slightly more, actually. 30 and a half attempts a game. And they finished in the top 10 in the country in three-pointers made at 356. So they were shooting it well, 36% clip, and finished 13th nationally, scoring 82 points a game. So I don't know what A&M averaged this year, 65 maybe, points a game. So
7, yeah.
A much more, entertaining style of basketball, I guess, unless you are sort of old school, defense rebounding type of a fan. But if you like to see scoring and threes and the press, I think it'll be cool. And kind of what we talked about last week, who knows if it'll work out like any hire in college athletics, but I like the thought process here, and that is what we talked about last week, where we've seen it with Florida, we've seen it with not Auburn, excuse me, Florida and holy smokes.
Bama?
Yes. Yeah. Hiring a guy from a lower division who runs, an exciting style, because, let's face it, I think Alabama and A&M and Alabama probably even has better history basketball than A&M, but like, we're not a blue blood, so we're not going to be able to go out and get some big name guy, even though A&M has money. Like, there's more to it than that. So to get a guy who's excited to be here, has no fear, because he's only coached at the lower levels and he's had success. Like, I think that's a good a good thing. Whether or not it works out, I think it's the right methodology behind the hire. So excited to see how it works out. Excited to see a different style of basketball, and we'll see from there. Anything else on McMillan?
Only other thing I would say is, we touched on Scott Strickland, right, and how he should hug Todd Golden every night before he goes to bed for saving his job. But this is you touched on it last week. You talked about this last week. Is that this is a big hire for Trev Alberts? This is Trev Alberts is really his first big hire at A&M. He did have to hire the baseball coach Michael Early after Schlossnagle stabbed Aggies in the back and went to Texas, but that one was kind of under duress, right? Like that was I almost give him a mulligan on that one because of the circumstances that surrounded it. It was such a crazy thing that happened post-national championship in a time frame where a lot of coaches have already left for new jobs. You're in the portal's open. Like it was such a mess at the end of that baseball season that he probably could have gone a different direction, but the Michael Early hire at the time, right, hindsight 2020, makes a lot of sense. And part of it was to keep the roster together and just try to keep the trains on the tracks and try to run it back with a team that just made the College World Series, right, and was within a run of winning. So I kind of give them a mulligan on that, and I think the jury's still out. It's been a very tough year for A&M, but they got a shot of juice in the arm, which we can touch on in a minute when we talk SEC baseball. But I think the jury's still out on that one. I'm not ready to totally throw in the talent early yet. But because of that, I put that one aside and give him a mulligan on that one, no matter what, whether it goes good or bad. So this one is his big hire, right? Ross Bjork hired Mike Elko kind of on his way out the door. And now Trev Alberts comes in. And of the three major sports, this is his first really big hire under fairly normal circumstances, right? So we'll see. Bucky McMillan, a lot is riding on this hire for Trev Alberts. And, truth be told, for those who aren't Aggies fans and don't keep a pulse of the fan base, there's a little frustration out there with Alberts. I don't necessarily understand it myself. I think that Trev Alberts has come into some pretty difficult circumstances. I frankly don't think that Ross Bjork left the athletic department in a very good standing, as you and I have discussed off air. So I think he came into something that was a bit of a mess. I think that he is starting to get it on the tracks. I think he's doing a lot of things internally, structurally for the athletic department that will be helpful in the long term. But the forward-facing things have been kind of so far, early returns. And those forward-facing things are what the fans typically are watching, right, and are looking at. And they're frustrated with where it is right now. So I think there's a lot of eyeballs on Trev Alberts and this hire to make sure that it goes well. Because right now, I think if you polled the Aggie fan base, it would be probably like a presidential poll, like 55% approve and 45% don't, and that number of don't is continuing to rise, especially as Aggie baseball flounders. So big hire here for Trev Alberts.
Yeah, agreed. We'll take a quick ad break here, and then we'll touch on spring games and baseball. So again, we are brought to you by the Steer Agency. Football is all about strategy, just like winning in business. Whether you're dialing up the perfect play on Saturdays or looking to dominate in public affairs, PR, or digital marketing, you need a team that delivers results. That's where the Steer Agency comes in. They craft winning strategies that get you seen, heard, and ahead of the competition. Don't just play the game, control it. Visit thesteeragency.com today and take your brand to the next level. So shout out to those guys at the Steer Agency for helping us out and supporting the show. As I mentioned, let's touch on baseball and then we can close with spring games. So we've got some pretty big series coming up. Number one, Arkansas going to Georgia to play number 7. I think Georgia, somebody comment if I'm mistaken here. I think they won their game on Sunday against Texas and avoided a sweep, but got beat up pretty good. They lost, so got beat up good, got swept by the Longhorns last week. So Big weekend in Athens with number 1 in town. LSU, number 3, traveling to Auburn. Auburn got beat up pretty bad last week. I'm forgetting who they played, but they had a pretty rough one, I think. So no rest for the weary.
They actually ended up beating Alabama.
Oh, was it 2 out of 3?
2 out of 3. They ended up beating them in the last game, so they took 2 out of 3 over Alabama.
All right. Well, shame on me. Then we have Tennessee, who they got beat up, losing 2 to A&M, surprisingly. And they're headed to Ole Miss, who we don't have to get into this, but it's good to see Ole Miss back. They've been extremely up and down over the last couple of years. They won it all 2 years ago and then didn't make the tournament. And, they've been all over the map. But they seem like they've got a great program this year. So good to see Oxford rocking again. That I'm sure will be, no offense to Athens and Auburn, but that is where I would choose to go. If I had a private jet and could go see any of these weekend series, I would be in Oxford for the Tennessee series. I love the atmosphere they have down there. And then Vanderbilt traveling to Norman to play a solid Oklahoma team. So really good weekend series. That's pretty much the story every weekend from here on out, right? There's going to be big series the rest of the way, just because the SEC dominates when it comes to baseball. So I guess we can kind of just level set here, and then we can talk about anything we want. But I did want to just touch on, because we haven't been talking about it much on this show because of football season and basketball, and we've had other things to talk about. So we haven't touched much on the SEC baseball. We touch on it every week in the newsletter. Plug on that if you'd like to subscribe. But where we stand now, so we mentioned earlier, Florida really struggling despite being a College World Series team last year and preseason top 5. They're 1-11 in the SEC, which I think has them basically at the back. Only Mizzou is worse. Mizzou's 0-12. So Missouri hasn't won a game. South Carolina struggling as well. Had a good start to the season, but they're 2-10 in the SEC. And then the next two are kind of surprising. Mississippi State, another team, something going on in Mississippi where those teams go off and, they have a great history, storied programs on the baseball diamond, but very up and down the last few years. Mississippi State, no different. They're sitting at 20-13 overall, but are only 3-9 in the SEC. A&M also 3-9 in the SEC. Unfortunately for the Aggies, they're only 17-15 overall because they dropped a bunch of garbage games in the non-con. Kentucky holding pesky, I would say, at 5-7 in the SEC, along with Oklahoma at 5-7. Auburn 6-6 in the SEC, 23-10 overall, and now we're getting into kind of what I would say are the big boys. No offense to Auburn and Oklahoma. I know they're ranked. They're going to be in the postseason. But in terms of legitimate SEC contenders, I would say you've got Alabama and Vanderbilt at 7-5 in the league. Georgia and Ole Miss at 8-4 in the league. Tennessee's at 9-3. LSU is 10-2. And then Arkansas and Texas are 11-1. So, man, it's, as we said, loaded as usual. What are your thoughts here? I guess, even just looking at this, the top 10 has 6 SEC teams in it with Arkansas, Texas, LSU, Tennessee, Ole Miss, and Georgia. But being as this is really the first time we touched on it, any thoughts? What are you thinking about SEC baseball so far, looking ahead?
This is the perfect time to start paying attention. Right. We're now in the heart of SEC play. We're a couple series into SEC play. And from here on out, like you mentioned, it's just going to be awesome series after awesome series after awesome series. So I'm looking forward to really starting to pay attention. I've had I've had it in the background and just kind of keeping an eye on what's been going on in the SEC. But right now is when it gets real and all these series become, each one that much more. The level of play rises, the pressure rises, and, all these spots are on the line in terms of the regionals and making it to the postseason. And, even those teams at the bottom, right? I'll put A&M. A&M right now, like the way they're playing, probably out. However, what you do to the number one team in the nation with Tennessee, go to their place and take 2 out of 3 from them. And then A&M won last night as well, got a win. So they've won 3 straight. And that team still has one of the best rosters in college baseball. So don't count the Aggies out just yet. Those teams at the bottom of the SEC, maybe not like South Carolina, who's 2-10. They're going to have a rough go of it. But even if they get super hot, there's a couple teams at the bottom there. I'm just going to say it, right, that if they get really hot, they can make the postseason. So nobody's out of it just yet. But there are those teams at the top that really just look like total juggernauts, especially, hate to say it as an Aggie, but Jim Schlossnagle, at the end of the day, I think that guy's proven it at this point. The guy can flat out coach. And he's got Texas, who was on rough times, had a couple of tough years, even though they were, kind of dabbling in the postseason, right? They were on the edge and kind of like top 20-ish, every year. Schloss comes in there in year one. He's got him at number 2 in the country, and they are smoking fools. So credit to him, hate to say it, but credit to him. He's done a fantastic job there in Austin, and they're super hot, right? I think it was, I had the numbers here in the newsletter. Arkansas, the guys at the top of the league are super hot right now. Arkansas has won 8 straight. Texas won 4 straight, and LSU has won 9 straight. So, these teams at the top are just red hot, and I don't expect that to change really much. I think these teams at the top are really, really good teams. I don't think, a couple of them, Arkansas's at 30-3, Texas at 26-4, LSU at 30-3. Wouldn't be surprised at all if all of them end up with 10 or less losses on the year, probably less, frankly. So the league, again, is super deep this year. Going to be a lot of fun to watch. And, again, even these series, we didn't list them on our graphic here. We got a bunch of great series this weekend, and all of those are, ranked on ranked matchups, absolutely, worth your time. But there's other series across the conference that, like I mentioned, sorry about the sun here. Angels in the outfield going on right now. I need to get a curtain. Shows you the production value that I have going on here. But even those series that aren't ranked on ranked matchups, even if we have a ranked on, a non-ranked or anything like that, those are still worth watching too, because some of those teams, like I mentioned, right, still have a shot. If they get hot, they keep taking 2 out of 3, they get a couple sweeps, they're still in it, and they could easily rise up those standings in the SEC, get dangerous in the SEC tournament, and then have a chance to make the postseason. So we've got another 2 weeks, right, to watch those teams. And if a couple of those teams are able to take the next 2 series, then there's a real shot that some of them can make the postseason. And I say that as an Aggie, just with a little bit of hope. SEC shorts, I got hope is still there for a lot of these teams that are even in the bottom half of the SEC.
Yeah, no, I would agree. I think there's definitely an opportunity there. One thing I'll say too about Texas is I saw this other day. And let me see if I can just pull this up real quick on the fly. But one of the keys to their success this season, very similar to A&M's last season, and Slosh has done a great job overall, but pitching coach, Max Weiner. So he was a stud on A&M staff, was a big loss. And so far this year, I saw this the other day. I cannot remember. I think they were second nationally right now, Texas, that is, in team ERA. Here, I'm looking at it right now. So Texas right now is second nationally in team ERA behind Western Kentucky. Western Kentucky leads with a 2.67 ERA, and Texas is sitting at 3.03. That's fantastic. And if you look down the rest of the top 10, guess who's also in there? Tennessee, Vanderbilt, LSU, Arkansas, North Carolina, Coastal Carolina. Mm-hmm. Those teams are also all having great seasons, right? So again, I'm not saying anything revelatory here that having a good ERA makes you a good baseball team, but just really impressive what Max Weiner does, what he did at A&M, what he's already doing at Texas. And I know we have a lot of athletic directors that watch this show. That's well known in Biscuits and SEC circles. Please hire this guy. Get him out of Austin. Make him a head baseball coach somewhere. Because when it comes to pitching staffs, I mean, he's a wizard. And it's showing this year in Texas as it did while he was at A&M. So, yeah, hire that guy away so I don't have to hear about him anymore, at least while he's in the burnt orange.
Could be something to watch. There could be a couple of jobs that do come open after this year. I know Mississippi State fans, despite getting a national championship a couple of years ago, are about ready to run their coach out of town. In fact, I saw a couple accounts post April Fool's jokes a couple of weeks ago about the Mississippi State coach being fired, and a lot of people in the comments were responding positively. I'm also realizing that it was April Fool's and saying, man, don't do me like this. Like, I wish this was real. So not wishing anybody gets fired here, but I do think that there are a couple jobs that could come open in the SEC and even outside the SEC, right? There's, the potential for some good jobs to come open. So I'm with you. Get Max Weiner the heck out of Boston.
Yeah. It's too painful.
Yeah.
And, the Schlossnagle thing is one thing, but yeah, Weiner, he's a wizard. So somebody hire him. He's a good coach. Well, let's close it out on spring games. So we don't have a biscuit of the week this week or a Muschamp coach of the week. So we're just a little bit in off-season mode. Apologies there to our adoring fans. But on the spring game subject, so you made us a nice graphic here that just shows the spring games we have this weekend. I'll hand it off to you to kind of discuss what exactly they are, because it seems like most of them are not actually spring games.
Yeah, so I was writing this up for the newsletter this morning, and I honestly, I could talk about the state of college football and the experience for the fans for probably half a show at least, maybe longer. I could filibuster for a long time on this subject. But to start it off here, you got the spring, quote unquote games, as you can see at the top, happening this weekend across the SEC. Then you have on Friday, April 18th, so coming up next week, is South Carolina at 7:30. And then you've got the Saturday following April 18th. So April 19th, you got Mississippi State, Arkansas, and Texas A&M. A lot of these teams are not really doing a game. Oklahoma is kind of doing like a combine almost, like basically like a Pro Bowl, the new Pro Bowl style of a combine or whatever. And then, the others are kind of, some of them are doing scrimmages. Some of them, like Ole Miss, isn't even holding some sort of, game or anything like that or scrimmage. They're just doing an autograph day, which Texas is also doing as well. Texas is doing some sort of fan day, which, in the olden days, teams used to have a fan day and they also used to do a spring game, right? So it's not like this is something new to do an autograph day and like a fan day. It's just kind of something old that they're bringing back and using it as an excuse to not have a spring game. But, we don't have to go into it too long because we're almost at an hour here. But I just think, and I saw this on another channel this week as well, they were discussing this. For a long time, I've been thinking about this in terms of the fan experience and what fans got for their dollar, right? Their dollar went a long way. Back in the day, you got season tickets at a reasonable price. And if you had season tickets, you could have them for 10, 15 years. The price might, rise incrementally. It might rise a little bit, but you never were going to look at your season tickets and be like, see them, the price is raised to an extravagant point where you're going to stop, right? Now, there is so much being asked of the fans, just in terms of our season ticket prices. They've gone through the roof, in the last 10 or 15 years for schools that are just trying to keep up in the arms race of facilities, right? And all these new things, coach buyouts. Now you also add on top of that fans are essentially being asked to pay for NIL. Some big donors are doing it, but you're also seeing, many of these different schools have funds, right? And you can pay into the fund to help us go get the next and latest and greatest 5-star. And that's just where we're going. It's the changes in college athletics, but the bang for your buck for a fan has gone down significantly in the last 10 years. And it really frustrates me to see the fan experience go down while so much is being asked of them. And I think one of the byproducts of this in the NIL era is the fact that we no longer have spring games. And, some of these are happening, but for instance, only one team is going to have a game that is broadcast on television. Going back even just like 2 years ago, I could watch almost every team in the SEC at the time, 14 teams, all 14 teams, all of their spring games on SEC Network or ESPN if I wanted to. And I would watch at least, 4 or 5, as many as I could catch and make time for. I would watch them because I was just interested to see the new players. You always got like fun. A lot of the coaches were mic'd up, so you got some fun sound bites from that. They would have coach interviews, right, talking about the team and kind of what they were seeing. So you got, even though these were watered down games, you got a lot of insight and just, it was interesting. And it also got you excited for football. So I don't like the byproduct of this era and, the tampering and all that. And maybe if the tampering is quelled in the next couple of years as the Power Four moves to their own enforcement mechanisms, maybe we see spring games come back. I worry that that's not going to be the case and that what is done and that we probably aren't going to get them back. So anyway, that's my soapbox. I am just very frustrated to see these games go away. I think they're wonderful for fans, especially for those who are local, right, and can make it to the game in Knoxville or make it to the game in College Station or Athens or what have you. And there's still that experience to some degree in some of these places, but it's just not the same thing, So it frustrates me to see this. But if you are local in some of these places, make sure you get out and check out your teams.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think you're probably right. It's perhaps a conversation for a different podcast. We got plenty more off-season podcasts coming up. We could probably just do a sort of State of the Union on college athletics or college football in particular, and spring games, how that factors in, kind of how it weaves in there, because I think it's exemplary of much larger issues that are still really not being dealt with. I mean, as a matter of fact, I just saw today Mike Elko had a press conference, and they were talking about the House settlement, which I don't really want to get into here. We talk about that more on the newsletter, but talking about the House settlement and when that potentially might be finalized. And he just, I think expressed what every single coach out there is saying, where he's like, yeah, it's a little frustrating that we're about to close up spring practice here, and I don't even know how big my roster is allowed to be next year, because that hinges on this House settlement. And again, these guys get paid a ton of money, and they get paid a ton of money, but they put up with a boatload of garbage like this because nobody is in charge. Nobody has control of the wheel. There are a million different entities, whether it's NIL collectives, agents, other coaches tampering. Now, the House settlement, we're talking about Congress. Like, all these different people are kind of grabbing the wheel, have control of the wheel for 10 seconds, and then the other person jerks it away. And it's just, and the coaches have no power, right? So they're just sitting in the back like, holy crap, what is going on? We are out of control, careening toward crashing, and this is not good. And, again, still nobody has control. And I think you're right. Spring games are one thing that, when you talk about college football and how it's different from the NFL and how it's, close or intimate with the fans, spring games on a national scale are not a big deal, right? You're not getting big TV audiences. They're not selling commercials. They're not money makers, but they are unique to college football. They're great for local fans. They're typically free. You get to go to the stadium, bring your whole family, and it's a very fun day. And it's good for the players to, finish their spring practice with a game. It's good for coaches, good for fans, and you don't have to spend $1,000 to bring a family of 4 to your SEC stadium. So I agree. The fact that they're going away is just kind of a shame, and it sucks. And it's, add this to the list of things that have changed that kind of suck about college football. And until somebody gets control, we're going to keep losing things that we love and that, make the sport unique. And I'm with you. I would hope some things we can claw back, but I kind of think most of the things that we're losing will probably stay that way. So we kind of just have to salvage what we have left.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I mean, one of the frustrating things too, to me, and one of the beautiful things about spring games, like you talked about the intimate relationship between the fans and the team, right, and the school, because you didn't get a degree from the Dallas Cowboys, right? Like a lot of people got their degree from the University of Georgia, Texas A&M, Florida, right? Like go down the list. Every SEC team, you have a very close bond with your school, and then with your football team, right? Like that's why fans are so rabid in the SEC and across college football, is because you went there for 4 years and you attended every game that you could, and you were there when, like for me, I was there at the Johnny Manziel game in 2012 against Alabama. I'll never forget it. It was incredible, right? And I know that every fan across the SEC of any team can name 4 or 5 games, right, that they'll never forget, and a couple that they were at, right? And so, that's wonderful. But to the intimacy of the spring games, like, how many times over the years on CBS, when CBS was doing, the SEC on CBS, how many times over the years have you seen a picture of a kid who is on a team now who was at a spring game 10 years ago and, met Rex Grossman, right? Or met a star of that team, and it really, they were enthralled, and they loved the team. And then they were like, this is what I want to do. And they worked hard enough and ended up making the team. The one that comes to mind for me, and it didn't actually work out this way, but Cade Klubnik. Cade Klubnik was an Aggie legacy and went to Austin Westlake and had this great career. And even though he didn't end up going to A&M, I remember seeing multiple pictures of him at Aggie spring games, multiple Aggie spring games when he was a kid, having the A&M hat on and all excited, and pictures with with the players after the game, and pictures with the coaches and all that sort of stuff. And I just think if we don't do these sorts of things, and I think the fan days are nice, but I just think the spring game adds another element to it, right? And I just think we're losing that element, and I don't like it. I like how college football was. I like, the nostalgia of it and why I came to love college football. And I think a lot of fans around college football would agree with us.
Totally. Yeah, no, I agree. The fan days are cool. Autograph days are cool, but especially when you're a kid, even if it's not a real game, it's cool to see the guys strapped up, pads on, playing something on the field, as opposed to just walking around with your 2025 team poster and getting some autographs from 4 random guys.
And to your point too, like, to close this out real quick, a lot of them are free, and you can take your full family there, and your whole family can sit at the 50-yard line 3 rows up. Not every family can do that, especially now with where ticket prices are and how much it costs to go and get a hotel for a family of 4, right? It doesn't matter what SEC town you're talking about, but especially in a lot of SEC towns, because they're small towns, right? So there's not a lot of hotels. So every weekend the prices are stupidly jacked up. And so, you could spend easily thousands of dollars on a weekend for a family of 4 and probably go to Cabo or something, for much cheaper.
Yeah.
Right. So you're losing that element of it, where these families can bring their kids to, enjoy something together. and create that bond that many fathers and sons and fathers and daughters and even, wives and their kids create around these games and around these teams. Whereas, many folks really, when it comes to the season, can only afford, for a family of four, nosebleeds. If they can afford them, they're not going to be able to get up close to the players and everything like that. So again, that's, I think, what we're losing here with spring games. And I hope that they'll come back, though I am worried that they won't.
Yeah, I guess we'll see. Maybe they can mandate that when, Greg Sankey takes over or something.
I'm appealing to the future commissioner of college football, Josh Pate. When Josh Pate is the commissioner of college football, day one, executive order, spring games must be played.
Yeah, I think he would be on board with that bill if we draft it up and send it to his desk. I think we would get a signature from Commissioner Pate. So, all right, I think that will do it for us. We've gone a little bit over here. So thanks again, everybody, for tuning in. Thanks to the Steer Agency for sponsoring the show. Hope you enjoyed another off-season Biscuits and SEC Live. We will see y'all next week, same time, Wednesday, 7 p.m. Eastern. Don't forget to like, subscribe, follow us on our social channels, and sign up for the newsletter. As always, thank you all for the support.
Thanks, everybody.